The world woke up this weekend to a jolt, not because of a speech, not because of a treaty, but because American forces seized the president of Venezuela. And in the hours that followed, something else happened. The language of power changed. From the cockpit of Air Force One, from campaign rallies, from television studios, Donald Trump began drawing a map of the world, not with borders, but with warnings. Greenland, Colombia, Cuba, Mexico, Iran, places separated by oceans and ideologies, yet suddenly linked by a single message. American dominance will not be questioned again. I want you to pause for a moment and ask yourself this. Is this about Venezuela? Or are we watching the return of something much larger, a worldview where strength is spoken aloud, publicly, unapologetically? Because when a president says, we need Greenland, or hints that military action in Colombia sounds good, or warns Iran that the United States is locked and loaded, he is not improvising. He is signaling, if you want to understand the world you are living in, and the one you may soon inherit, stay with me. And if this kind of deep, clear-eyed analysis matters to you, this is the moment to subscribe and share, because the next few minutes will reframe how you see American power today. Now let's step back and look at what is really happening. Bridge. To understand the shockwaves of this moment, we first need to define the question at its core. At the heart of this moment is a simple but uncomfortable question. What does American power mean in 2025? For decades, the United States spoke the language of alliances, rules, and restraint, even when it broke them. Power was exercised quietly. Threats were implied, not declared. What we are seeing now is different. This is power spoken out loud. When Donald Trump says the United States needs Greenland for national security, he is not negotiating. He is redefining sovereignty as a strategic variable. When he dismisses Cuba as ready to fall, he is not analyzing an economy. He is framing inevitability. When he tells Iran it will be hit very hard, he is not warning. He is conditioning the world for escalation. These statements are not isolated. They form a pattern, a worldview where geography is leverage, where resources are justification, where dominance is not hidden behind diplomacy, but declared as policy. And that changes how every country, ally, and adversary alike must respond. Bridge. But no worldview emerges overnight. To understand this one, we need to trace where it comes from and why it feels familiar. To understand this moment, we have to widen the lens. Because what we are seeing did not begin with Venezuela, and it did not begin with Donald Trump. It begins with cycles of power. After the Cold War, the United States emerged as the world's uncontested superpower. For a time, strength was wrapped in institutions, NATO, the WTO, international law. Military force was used, but legitimacy mattered. Consent mattered. Optics mattered. Then came fatigue, endless wars, globalization shocks, rising competitors, and a growing sense inside America that restraint was being mistaken for weakness. Trump's worldview is born from that moment. In this logic, security is no longer abstract. It is physical. Oil must freely come out. Shipping lanes must be controlled. Territory must serve strategy. Greenland becomes not a people, but a platform. Venezuela becomes not a nation, but an energy node. Latin America becomes not sovereign states, but a sphere. History tells us this language has appeared before, when empires feel pressure and choose clarity over caution. Bridge. And once this logic is unleashed, it does not stay theoretical for long. It looks for a flashpoint. The flashpoint arrived quietly. Then all at once, the seizure of Venezuela's president was not just a tactical move. It was a declaration, because Venezuela is not merely a troubled state. It sits atop the world's largest proven oil reserves. And in Trump's words, the goal is a hemisphere where the oil is allowed to freely come out. This is the first mini crisis, and it matters far beyond Caracas. When Trump said American dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never be questioned again, he wasn't speaking to Venezuela. He was speaking to everyone else. Colombia heard it, and suddenly its president was labeled a criminal, with operations casually floated on live television. Cuba heard it described as a regime already collapsing, waiting only for a push. Mexico heard it warned that if it doesn't get its act together, someone else might do it for them. Power, once used, creates gravity. If you're watching this and wondering whether this was inevitable pause, moments like this reshape norms. They teach leaders what is possible. If this analysis helps you see the pattern forming, share it. Because the most dangerous shifts are the ones people recognize too late. Bridge, and now comes the deeper question. What mechanism allows one action to ripple across continents? What makes this moment powerful and dangerous is not any single threat. It is the mechanism beneath them. This administration has fused three ideas into one doctrine. First, security is material. Oil, shipping routes, territory, proximity. These are no longer economic factors. They are treated as existential. Second, sovereignty is conditional. If a state cannot control drugs, migration, resources, or unrest, its independence becomes negotiable. Third, language is leverage. By speaking threats publicly, repeatedly, Trump removes ambiguity. He forces other governments to react defensively, emotionally, visibly. This is not impulsive. It is strategic pressure through exposure. When Greenland is described as something the United States needs, Denmark is placed on the defensive. When Colombia's president is personally attacked, the debate shifts from policy to legitimacy. When Iran is warned in absolutist terms, every protest becomes a potential trigger. This mechanism compresses time. Diplomacy slows. Escalation accelerates. And once leaders begin responding not to actions, but to words, the system becomes brittle. Bridge. Brittle systems don't bend, they snap. And the second crack is already forming. The second crack doesn't come from tanks or missiles. It comes from people. In Iran, protests spill into the streets, not for geopolitics, but for dignity. And suddenly, internal unrest is no longer internal. When Trump says that if Iran kills peaceful protesters, the United States will come to their rescue, the line between human rights and regime change blurs. When he adds that America is locked and loaded, every baton, every bullet, every arrest takes on international weight. This is the second mini-crisis. Because Iran's leadership hears something very different. They hear precedent. They remember that American bombs hit their nuclear facilities just months earlier. They hear warnings about knocking them down if Iran rebuilds. And so repression becomes not just survival, but deterrence. Escalation feeds itself. Protesters push harder. Authorities respond harsher. External threats justify internal force. This is how local crises globalize. Bridge. But while leaders posture and systems strain, the real pressure travels downward to ordinary lives. Now let me bring this closer to you. Because geopolitics always sounds abstract until it isn't. When powerful nations speak in threats, it is not presidents who absorb the shock first. It is ordinary people. If you live in Mexico, you hear talk of cartels and intervention, and you wonder whether cooperation will ever be enough. If you live in Colombia, you hear your country reduced to cocaine and your democracy questioned. If you live in Greenland, you hear your homeland discussed as a need, not a nation. And if you live in Iran, every protest becomes a risk calculation, not just against your own government, but against what foreign pressure might provoke next. This is what power does when it descends. It turns daily life into uncertainty. Jobs pause. Borders tighten. Fear becomes ambient. You don't choose these dynamics, but you live inside their consequences. If you've ever felt that global politics is happening to you, not with you, you're right. And if this perspective resonates, take a moment, share this analysis. because understanding is the first defense people have when systems begin to harden around them. Bridge. But these pressures do not stop at borders. They radiate outward, reshaping the global balance itself. When power radiates outward, it doesn't travel in straight lines. It moves through alliances, markets, assumptions. When the United States openly questions Greenland's sovereignty, every small state with strategic geography takes note. When a NATO ally like Denmark is told it can't do it, the meaning of alliance subtly shifts from mutual commitment to conditional protection. In Latin America, the message is even sharper. The hemisphere is no longer just a neighborhood. It is a zone of enforcement. Governments recalibrate. Some lean closer to Washington, hoping proximity brings safety. Others quietly explore alternatives, China, Russia, regional blocs, not out of ideology, but insurance. And in the Middle East, the implications are profound. Iran's standoff with the United States does not exist in isolation. Israel watches closely. Gulf states calculate risk. Energy markets price in instability. When threats are spoken openly, uncertainty becomes global currency. The result is not immediate war, but strategic friction everywhere. More hedging, less trust, a world where cooperation costs more and miscalculation costs everything. Bridge. So where does this trajectory lead? History suggests it never ends in one place but in choices. When systems reach this point, the future does not arrive as a single outcome. It branches. Let me offer you three possible paths. In the first, the optimistic one, clarity replaces chaos. Trump's threats achieve what they intend to do, deter action without requiring force. Greenland remains Danish, but NATO strengthens Arctic coordination. Mexico and Colombia deepen cooperation without crossing red lines. Iran's protests subside without mass bloodshed, and escalation pauses. In this world, pressure produces adjustment, not collapse. In the second, the middle path, ambiguity hardens. Threats become routine. Intervention remains selective. No single crisis explodes, but distrust calcifies. Allies comply more out of fear than belief. Adversaries probe constantly. The world becomes tense, but functional. Then there is the third path, the dangerous one. Words outrun control. A protest turns deadly. A warning demands credibility. A move meant as leverage becomes irreversible. History is unforgiving here. Great powers rarely stumble because they lack strength. They stumble because they mistake pressure for stability. Bridge. And that brings us to the final question, not about America's power, but about our responsibility to understand it. Let me leave you with this. Power is not just the ability to act. It is the discipline to choose when not to. What we are witnessing is not chaos, it is a philosophy. A belief that clarity, dominance, and public pressure can restore order in a fragmented world. Sometimes that works. Often it doesn't. Because when leaders speak in absolutes, they reduce room for retreat. And when retreat disappears, escalation fills the vacuum. Greenland's prime minister was right to say his country is not an object. Colombia's president was right to defend his legitimacy. Mexico was right to insist on sovereignty. Iran, too, believes it is defending itself. Each of these reactions is rational in isolation. Together, they form a system under strain. If you want to understand the world ahead, don't just watch what powerful nations do. Listen to how they speak, because language shapes reality long before reality turns violent. If this analysis helped you see the structure beneath the headlines, subscribe, share, and stay with me. The next conversation will go deeper into how global power can be restrained without breaking the system itself. Until then, remember this.